This National Historic Landmark, the T. Thomas Fortune Cultural Center, is the former home of the great journalist T. Thomas Fortune, who was born into slavery in 1856. Fortune was a descendant of Native American and African heritage plus Irish lineage.
I'm a descendant of the Lenape tribe. We would be a remnant of the Navasink. Our family, we can trace ourselves back to the Ramazin community, which is the former name of the area that we call Tinton Falls, Colts Neck, things of that, that area.
My grandmother's people were from northern Georgia. There's a Cherokee County there. I'm not sure if that's where they were from, but that's the story that we were all told. And the Cherokees at the time had treaties with the governors of Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and all of them, of course, fell apart. As they continued to lose their lands, they moved. They tried to migrate to different areas. Apparently, my grandmother's people decided to come north, and they had cousins here, and they settled in Tinton Falls, mostly. The Eatontown area of Grant Avenue and Richardson Avenue and South Street was a community there. The property records that I have go back to there. The tax records go back to 1780 in Tinton Falls. So there's a record of them settling here. They owned 105 acres along Shafto Road at one time, part of Tinton Falls also. That was later taken by eminent domain by Monmouth County freeholders and turned into the Reclamation Center. So the farms, the streams, the beautiful flowers, and the trails, and all the homes of all the people were covered up by trash from all of Monmouth County. The African presence here in Monmouth County actually goes back to the 1670s when Lewis Morris settled here from Barbados and brought in 20 or so Africans from Barbados. They lived on Tinton Avenue, what we know as Tinton Avenue now, at the mill, which is now a restaurant, right there by the falls. And that community, that African community, grew to hundreds of people. There's also an African cemetery right by the falls on the property of the Tinton Falls Historical building. On the old maps, it's located, and that's where the Africans were buried. So Africans have had a presence here in Monmouth County since the very beginning of the English settlement.
Okay, well, in terms of the African American and runaway slaves, my great-grandfather's farm was a station for the Underground Railroad. So we took in African slaves. We helped them escape up north, all the way up into Canada, but also those of them that stayed in the area. The two blended together and formed a community out in Pine Brook, which was called Reevytown, which is named after a group of Lenape Indians. So since the start of that community, there's been a blend of what we would call African American runaway slaves and the native communities that were already present in Monmouth County. So that's one of the connections that we have with the two communities.
There were so many marriages between the Richardsons, who were my grandmother's people, and the Reeveys, who were the Lenape people here, Revey. The Monmouth County has recorded over a dozen marriages, so I think the marriages just brought the two groups together to the point where they were inseparable and merged together as just Native American people.
We had such a large family. I remember being able to go to any town in Monmouth County, having family there, being welcomed. Just, you know, I remember cousins more than friends. I remember the stories they would tell us. Obviously, Uncle Arnold was very influential in our life. You know, sitting on his knee, being told the stories, you know, being able to read about it. I just remember family. Like, I just remember basically family. It seemed like everyone was family.
My grandmother's recorded as white. And a lot of times the census records right at the top will say, if they own property, they are to be recorded as white. So to make sure that there was no problem with who's going to pay the taxes, they were recorded as white people. And then through the years, they were recorded as M for mulatto or mixed blood, and later black. So my grandmother went from white to M to black, all in one lifetime.
Ramazing, Shushaku Mooring, the greater community was called Shiekbi. Then you had Lenape-Hilking, which was the surrounding area, New Jersey, Eastern Pennsylvania, Northern Delaware, and like the 5 boroughs in New York. So those are some of the names. I'm sure, you have multiple dialects from the tribes, so I'm sure when you speak to different tribes, they would have their own unique names for the specific areas they lived in.
And one interesting thing about New Jersey, and of course the other states too, but New Jersey, as the settlers bought up the land from the different groups, they kept the names of the groups because those deeds, whenever there was a question, would go back to Navesink or Watchung or Hopatcong or Metuchen or Manasquan or Canarsie or Mamaroneck or Manhattan, and a lot that I'm forgetting, Kittatinny and Pocono, and the names are still with us. Wanamassa, Matawan, and a lot of them have been shortened because the names were longer, and the settlers just needed a little bit of the name to know where they were talking about. This chattel is a word that means connected with animals, and being treated not as human, but more as property.
Right.
And I guess when you think about it, it's kind of like women voting. It's like, how could women not be voting? I mean, it's just such a concept that's so foreign to how we think today, to think that people would be enslaved and have no future and no other way of life other than working for someone else. And the unfortunate reparations through the generations has caused the divide, divide in every part of society that we have today. The wealth divide, the education divide. I mean, everything you can think of
Directly correlates.
goes right back to generations of not being able to accumulate wealth, hold on to property, gain property, have your freedom, save, take care of your family. It's just been such a foundation of the dysfunction that we find all across our nations, our cities. And I mean, a lot of it's government directed. A lot of it didn't even wasn't a priority of the society necessarily, but when you have government policies that affect banking and mortgages and loans and insurance and all the things that make a family function, and you've got the government that is in direct opposition of supporting the people, but supports other people, then you're going to have problems that it's going to take generations to resolve, if it's ever resolved.
the dehumanization of people to allow those who were in control of a situation to basically govern and treat them as if they were property. Simple as that. Yeah, for life. It was very different than indentured servitude, and it was just a it was as if you were using people as instruments or tools.
My name is Valerie Young. I am the daughter of Gloria Richardson.
Very good.
My name is Bart Johnson. I'm the son of Grace Richardson.
Okay. Do you remember if any of your family members participated in powwows?
I have heard stories about our grandfather, who was a part of the Eatontown Richardsons, coming to Neptune, to Sand Hill, to powwow with the Indians on what they referred to as the Hill.
How did that make you feel when you heard that information?
It made us feel closer, felt very strong with our ties to Native American history.
Excellent. Do you think that holding quarterly powwows and informative events would help direct descendants of the First Nation tribes people to better understand their ancestors' belief system?
Definitely. Wayne, who has since passed, he was a Richardson. We used to go to Bud Lake just to reconnect with that culture that was White Wolf out of West Virginia. And it just gave you a sense of belonging and who you were and why we grew up the way we did. I attend powwows nationwide, and you just see some of the similarities and some of the teachings coming to the forefront. You're connected.
Yeah.
I remember going to powwows at my grandmother's when I was a kid many decades ago. And summertime was the time when the families reunited, came back together.
A powwow is a public opening to learn more about the culture, to participate in the foods, the Native American teachings.
Is it fun?
It is fun. It's very educational as well. They walk in, they honor the veterans, they come in first, the color guards. Then they'll have their different dance competitions. They'll explain the jingle dancers, the fancy dancers, the grass dancers. I mean, it just opens you up to a whole nother world.
For me, I've learned to honor my ancestors and to live in the light that they left for us. I found great pride in that, and just being honorable. A lot of the things I was plagued with growing up, considering myself this or that, or identifying with a description, which would be black, right? When I started to embrace my true ancestry, like my self-esteem, my pride in not just myself, but the surrounding areas, the places I grew up, all that just started to multiply within itself, and I felt myself becoming a better person. So that's what, that's how I would answer that question there. There's steps to it. I think the first thing we need to do as a people, those of us with this ancestry, is to start to learn the language and become more, reflective of what the language can teach us. All these values, your history, everything is encoded in the language. So once you start to embrace the language, you'll learn the culture, you'll learn the customs, and all that, everything will come along. So I think the primary thing for us is to learn the language. That will unlock keys, our connection to the land, and things of that nature. So I think that's the most important thing.
The Lenape language, I self-taught myself the Unami dialect, which is the dialect that everybody speaks in Monmouth County. And I did that because my great-great-great-grandmother knew both dialects, so that inspired me to learn at least the Unami. But now I learn the Muncie dialect, which is the other dialect, the Lenape, up in Muncie area, which is with the Ramapo Indians. Kwinganao Alomwa, that means greetings to all. we don't say bye. Lenape never says bye. We say see you later. So that means we say La Peach Canal.
They call the Indians the Americans, like way back in the 1700s. They were known as the Americans. They considered themselves the English, the British, the Irish, the French, the whoever. And then as time went by, they became the Americans. And the Native Americans were pushed aside, the African Americans, nobody was included in the title other than the Europeans.
Like if people would take the time to study the politics of Tammany Hall, they'll find out where the rituals and the rites of passage that Europeans had to go through to become Americans were very similar to the cultural customs of the traditional indigenous Native American people. They had to learn certain, this is where you get Boy Scouts and things of that nature from. They had to learn the ways of the land and how to live on the land. And these were a part of the rites of passage, which allowed these Europeans to now call themselves Americans. And a lot of this has to do with the politics of Tammany Hall. You study Chief Tammany and what he did for the Europeans, how he taught them. You'll be able to see where all these things were implemented and where the politics grew that we have fostered what we call United States of America. One of the last rivers in what we call Siberia, which would lead into Alaska, one of the main rivers over there is called the Lena River.
The Lena?
The Lena River, right? Lena representing the people. And this land we call is Lenapehoking, and we are the Lenni Lenape. So it's
Correlates.
There's a linguistic correlation between distant lands and these lands. The Cherokee, one of their stories, their ancient stories, is that they migrated from the east in the time of the Stone Age. So, we're a global people that have migrated to different parts of the planet at different times. And over those different periods of times, we develop different, we intermix with different people, we've taken on different appearances, but in the root of it, we're a global people.